talk to somebody who actually talk. Well, I mean, you talk to GMs, but let's talk to somebody who talks to GMs on a daily basis. Right. No. You do. I was gonna say who actually does, but you do. But you do. I know Vinny Goodwill from Yahoo talks to GMs. Okay, Vinny, we'll get to the firing of Doc in a second, which I think you more or less called last time you were on the show. But or the mutual departure, whatever we want to characterize it. But just settle that for us. Settle that for us real quick, Vinny. Go back to the offseason when, in order to get Kawhi to sign with the Clippers, they mortgaged their future and gave it to Oklahoma City for Paul George.
No, don't say no. Wait, don't say it that way.
What?
Say what the compensation.
Go ahead.
Say what the compensation.
Go ahead.
I think it was I think it's 5 first-round picks and 2 players. Am I right or am I right, Vinny? Is that what it was? 5 first-round picks and 2 players?
Swaps in there.
I'm running count. I'm losing count of how many times, how many players, picks and pick swaps and everything else. Yeah, it's kind of tricky. But I will grant you guys this. Today is media day for the NBA Finals, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Pat Riley is the godfather of the Miami Heat. He came there in 1995. The Heat did not have any identity. They barely made the playoffs. They were a franchise in infancy. His first 7 years, he won 3 playoff series. Except they stuck with him. And then years later, he became the godfather. So the Clippers could have stuck with him too and came up with the same result.
Maybe. Potentially. But just do me a favor. Just answer that one question, though. What was it, in hindsight, in retrospect, do you, as an expert or people around the league, believe that the Clippers overpaid for this potentially 2-year experiment with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George?
You overpay because these players don't come along too often, and players don't choose the LA Clippers. Like, let's get it serious, y'all. Chris Paul didn't choose the LA Clippers in a traditional way. He was sent there. Blake Griffin was drafted by them. The only reason Kawhi Leonard was going to the Clippers was because there was too much going on with the Lakers. So you do what you have to do as a franchise of non-consequence, as the Clippers are, to get the players. Look, I'm not saying that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are Halle Berry, but if you got to pay $500 to go on one date with Halle Berry, you going to pay it? Or is that overpaying?
$500? Absolutely.
Well, maybe Mike your bank account, who knows?
Yeah.
500. You just listen. 500, man. You messing around with
Holly
appetizers. $500. Vinny, you at the beginning of the night, my friend. Your pockets better be deeper than that. But let me ask you this, Vinny. Look, we were talking about it, and Mike Smith and I, we both agree that, you know, we cut Doc some breaks just because it's Doc. I mean, come on.
Stop.
But 3-1, he's up 3-1 over the Denver Nuggets. And as you look back, what percentage of blame would you put on Doc for that series loss to the Nuggets?
I think when you talk about the series loss in the vacuum, you can only put so much on them because that team was so disjointed, right? Lou Williams looked like he did not want to be there and didn't play well. Montrezl Harrell had his personal stuff going on. Paul George, well documented his own issues going on. And Kawhi Leonard, we don't know how well he responds from playing every other day for 2 months in a row. What I will grant you guys, what I will grant Doc level of graces on, is that this team did not have an on-court leader. It did not have a Chris Paul, did not have a Rajon Rondo. When you look at teams in the finals now, the Lakers and the Heat, they have players on the floor, vocal leaders, who can mirror exactly what the coach in the front office, the mantra is. There was no player like that for the LA Clippers. Kawhi Leonard's a leader by example, and you can't make Kawhi Leonard be anything that he is not. You know, the roster, maybe that's not solely on Doc Rivers, but if you're talking about how the team was coached in that playoff series, if you're good enough to be up 3-1, you're good enough to win the series, and they didn't close it out, and that has to be partly on the Spanish head coach.
Did you? This was the news of the night last night when it happened. You know, about 5:15 or so Eastern. And I text you immediately. I'm not gonna repeat what I text you. I was like, "Yo, you coming on tomorrow, right?" I mean, in the time between the time between when they lost to the Nuggets and yesterday, did you have an inkling, just as a reporter, as an insider, that this might be coming, or were you even shocked when it happened?
I think I was a little shocked at the timing of it. I thought this would be something, if it was going to happen, it was going to happen quick. But it being on the eve of NBA Finals Media Day, right, where the Lakers are taking center stage yet again, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Clippers decided to do this news dump the day before. And the fact that it was so many days of deliberation, it was almost like a jury going into quarters, right? Where we're going to figure out if Doc is guilty or not guilty. You're going to talk to the players. You're going to talk to the front office. You're going to talk to ownership and some of ownership's people. And then you're going to come up with a conclusion. I think Doc was a little surprised because of the timing of it. I think if you were going to do it, you could have done it immediately in the aftermath. Or maybe you want Ty Lue and you don't want Ty Lue to go too far down the line with the Philadelphia 76ers.
All right, Vinny, next best move for Doc and next best move for the Clippers.
Next best move for Doc. I'm not a fan of him going to the Philadelphia 76ers. I know they like him. I know they want him. I'm sure he could be useful there. But what about that situation that says stability and anything other than dysfunction, right? So if I'm Doc Rivers, I got 2 years left. I'll go to the TV booth. I'll go to the TV studio. I'll put some lotion on those vocal cords, and I will chill out for a couple years and wait until the next best job opportunity opens up. You don't have to take one right now. And it's not like Doc Rivers is like most other black coaches where if you do not take the next best opportunity, you don't get one. Doc has kind of bypassed that, and he'll get the velvet rope treatment, I believe, for his next opportunity. Because honestly, you're talking about the Philadelphia 76ers where Ben Simmons can't shoot, won't shoot, and Joel Embiid has either a bad back or bad knees, and that's a ticking time bomb. And that organization does not seem like something that I would necessarily feel comfortable walking into.
How about the Clippers? Who's their next coach?
Honestly, guys, there's not the answer, Ty Lue. And not just from the standpoint that he's the next best guy in line and everything else, but schematically from an X's and O standpoint, Ty Lue's a much better coach than people have given him credit for. People look at him as like LeBron's guy and everything else, but from an X's and O standpoint, that Cleveland Cavaliers team was well prepared and well executed, especially when you consider guys like Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, who aren't necessarily want to play defense. And you had LeBron, who he had to convince to play defense during different sport first. So I will say some of the things that the Clippers lack schematically, I think Ty Lue can sort of fill in those blanks and add to the fact that he's not a guy that's afraid to challenge Paul George and Kawhi Leonard when they're not playing up to snuff. So I would say he would be their best choice out of all these guys. I'm not necessarily a fan of the Jeff Van Gundy's or some of these other guys out here. I would at least be willing to give a chance to a guy who knows that organization and has some championship skins on the wall.
Yeah, I agree with Doc, man. That would be my prescription for Doc, is to take a sabbatical, which we all need sabbaticals. You know what I mean? And I think he just needs to recharge, spend some time with his family. Frankly, we talked about earlier, and you know this, Vinny, like how integral he was and how influential and how important he was in this conversation that emanated from the bubble around racial and social justice, how much of a leader he's been. I'd love to see what kind of work he could do in that arena, if he so chose. Not obligating him to, but if he so chose. I'd love to see, what he could do in this moment that we're in right now, as well as, how great he'd be, back on television or whatever. And in a couple of years, he'll probably look that much better to people. Right now, certainly he would be a great hire for any of those organizations looking for a coach. But it feels like, once he's away from it for a minute, he'll be recharged, and there'll be that much more of an appetite or a desire for somebody like Doc Rivers a year or so removed from this collapse. Don't you think, Vinny?
I mean, think about it like this. Doc Rivers stepped into the LA Clippers in 2013, and 6 months after he got there, Donald Sterling and V. Stiviano was placed into his lap. And he had to take the head of that organization, the worst organization in sports. He had to assuage all the team employees. He had to steer the players through a potential boycott and actually coach the team. And then he took over as team president. And maybe he was a little underqualified for that position. Maybe that was too much for him. But he's had a lot on his plate since he's gotten there. And maybe he's due for a little bit of rest, especially when you consider, and of all the coaches all the black coaches in sports, he's the most respected. He's the voice that speaks with clarity, with passion, with emotion, and honestly, guys, respected by white people. That's a burden.
Yeah.
And you mentioned black coaches in sports. The NBA has 4 of them. 4. So that's one more, by the way, Vinny. That's one more than Major League Baseball. So
can we stop calling can we call it Black League?
Thank you. So what's going on though? What is your analysis of this? Because the numbers have just gone down sharply in the last 7 or 8 years.
I think it's a number of things, guys. And the analytics movement is not necessarily against the black coaches, but there are not black coaches who are integrated into that world, right? So when you talk about speaking the owner's language, or you talk about so many new owners who come from the financial sector or the private sector, and that's the way that they made their money, they don't identify with black coaches with these black experiences. In my book, it looks like moving the goalposts. You see all these guys with so many experiences. How many black coaches do you see on the sidelines but are not in the first chair, where they're the quote-unquote players coach, or they're the guy who can kind of talk to the guys when things go wrong? That's their value. It's not necessarily being a face of the franchise. And when you look at it like this, I think about it like this, guys. You can make the case for 3/4 of the coaches in the NBA being fired, just like you can make the case for the same thing in the NFL. It's the benefit of the doubt that black coaches don't get relative to their counterparts. I just brought up to you Pat Riley in 1995 when he came in with the Miami Heat, and the fact that he had fallen short of expectations. He had the Chicago Bulls to deal with, right? Doc Rivers had the Golden State Warriors that came out of nowhere and became a dynasty, and yet that wasn't held up as a reason to keep him aboard. But everything else was in line for Doc Rivers and the Clippers to take over. We talk about benefit of the doubt that is not necessarily being held up for black coaches in any sport. You can find any reason to fire a black coach if you want to, and you can find any reason to hire a white coach. And oftentimes that's what we see. It's not necessarily outright racism, but you kind of have a hard time convincing me that it doesn't have something to do with race.
It's got a lot to do with it. 'Cause, I mean, first of all, let's focus on the fact that we're strictly just talking about coaches. We're not even talking about general managers. And ownership is might as well be Star Trek Final Frontier, you know, when it comes to black ownerships. Because somebody told me this. I was talking to a former NFL GM, and I like the way he put it. He said when it comes to black GMs, we are elevated. We're not hired. As in a lot of times it's guys from within the organization as opposed to an organization actively seeking out outside candidates and finding a qualified, doing the work to find a qualified. It's not that hard to find a qualified black candidate. But in terms of the coaches, though, it is a problem, but there's a solution staring them right in the face in terms of the fact that there are now, with Doc moving on from LA, now there are 6 vacancies in the NBA. So it'll really be interesting, and I know, you know, they always hide behind it's an organizational, an individual organizational decision, but it feels like there needs to be some kind of meeting, some kind of conference call, and say, look, Houston in particular, but also Indiana, Philadelphia, Oklahoma City, New Orleans. It's like, hey guys, let's not drop the ball another 6 times when it comes to this, because I had this conversation with a friend of mine talking about Steve Nash. And remember that, Vinny, you remember that, obviously, we weren't on the air then, but that conversation was happening whether it was white privilege and it wasn't white privilege, and everybody was on opposite extremes. It's like one side or the other. It's white privilege. No, it's not. You know, why are you playing the so-called race card? And I said, both things can be true at the same time. Steve Nash can be qualified. It could be a decision driven by Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. He could have had a relationship with Durant going back to Golden State. He could be a basketball savant, and the white privilege still be involved, because like you said a second ago, Vinny, the goalposts keep getting moved. Just because you can find other black coaches who were hired with no coaching experience doesn't mean that every time you look, the qualifications differ, and there's always, you know, opportunities for white coaches that they just aren't for black assistant coaches, continuing to bide their time and pay their dues on the bench. But yet when it's time to actually get elevated, there's always a reason to hire somebody else, you know. So it's a problem,
two things, Mike.
They got an opportunity to fix it.
It's 2 things. You talk about the black assistant coaches, right? If you're in a black assistant coach and you've been on the sidelines for too long, then there's a problem about, hey, why hasn't he gotten a head coaching job as opposed to him being well-deserved? If you're too young, then you haven't paid your dues enough. There's never a good enough sweet spot, right? For someone to say that you're too young, you're not old enough, or vice versa, that makes white people feel comfortable with a black coach getting a head coaching job. And the second point, I think it speaks to the macro of all executive hirings across all sports. To me, it's benefit of the doubt. Whenever there's a black coach to me that's in line, or a black executive that's in line, ownership always talks about let's cast a wide net. Why does that sound like code for white? That sounds like let's go find the best white person we can find. Let's go get to one of these search firms who's going to tell us a bunch of things that we already know, and let's go hire the most qualified white guy who makes us feel comfortable, and let's pay them $1 million to say that we cast a wide net. That's the BS that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yo, before we let you go, homie, we got to get you on record with a finals pick. What you got and how many games?
Well, first I have a minor grievance before I give you my finals pick.
Oh, let's get the grievance.
The floor is yours.
I want to hear the grievance.
The floor is yours.
Do y'all hate that Microsoft Word-looking NBA Finals logo that we got right now? I know that I wasn't prepared to have the graphics up and everything. Why does everything look so bland with the NBA? Remember the final script, the cursive, it looked so good and elegant and all this? And now somebody in the league office who done crunched the number and said, let's make everything look like Microsoft Word so we can get YouTube at the bottom of it. That's my minor grump. I know that's like old man yelling at cloud and all that, and I'm this old soul. But I like the NBA Finals looking like the NBA Finals as opposed to looking like, high school in the backyard or whatever. But to my finals pick. Yeah.
You don't look at this logo and you don't say, you don't that song don't come to mind with this logo.
Hey, y'all, it's bubble basketball. What do you expect? Bubble basketball.
I expect something better, Holley. That's what I expect. But to my finals pick, I'm not gonna get caught picking against the Miami Heat again. They don't have the two best players.
Wow.
They don't have the X factor. I think they got the better coach, and they got the team that can't afford to lose. I don't think Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, even though they don't play, can afford to lose this series to LeBron James. You got Bam Adebayo, who matches up perfectly with Anthony Davis. You got Jimmy Butler, who can match up perfectly, along with Andre Iguodala, with LeBron James. All that being said, I'm picking the Lakers in 7.
Damn. Damn, dude. Man,
I almost bought it. I was right there. I was
right there with you.
I got Heat in 6, and I was feeling good. I'm like the expert on my side. I'm like Vincent Goodwill, feeling my pick. I'm feeling all credible and whatnot.
Call me a wuss if the Heat win. Call me a wuss.
I'm not gonna call you a wuss. I wouldn't do that.
No, listen,
I don't have the courage to pick the Heat.
You thought about it? You thought about it? You
don't really have the courage. We talking. You don't really have the courage to pick the Lakers if you're picking them in 7. I mean, somebody in 7. That's like I don't know. Somebody, in 7. Come on, Vinny. Pick them in 6. Pick them in 6. Or really disrespect the Heat and pick them in 5. Pick a gentleman's sweep.
Oh no, ain't gonna be no disrespect.
Go ahead.
Ain't no disrespect here. If it goes to 7, I feel good that I'm saying that anybody can win that series, and that's basically what I'm telling you.
And you got to go with LeBron if it goes to 7. You got to go with LeBron if it goes to 7. You got to pick the king in Game 7.
And Scott Foster.
Man, always a pleasure, brother. We appreciate you.
Vinny, good to see you,
Appreciate
man.
y'all.
All right.
Y'all too.